It gives me enormous pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, our closest ally. General James H. Dickinson is the commander of U.S. Space Command. Held commands at all levels, but he is now responsible for, and this is quite a portfolio, defending U.S. and ally interests in the space domain, providing space-enabled capability and combat effects to all joint warfighters, and he commands 18,000 personnel around the world from all of the services to provide space capabilities. General James, it's a real pleasure to welcome you. It's a bit of an inside joke here. I apologize for the rain. We'll try and make the sun come out for you for the rest of your visit. Over to you, sir, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Very good. Well, good morning, and thank you for that great welcome. It's good to be here in London. Had a couple of great days with my partner out here, Goddard's, and appreciate the opportunity to travel around a little bit and see this beautiful country and to be here today. And I was lucky that I had two great days of weather for my travels. I got to see some great U.S. and UK service members doing their job in space here in the UK as part of our global space enterprise. So again, it's great to be here. Thanks, Harv, for having me here today to share a few thoughts with you, and I'm pleased to be here. I'm really honored to be part of the Space Defense Conference, which is really focused today on international collaboration, norms of behavior, innovation, and industrial strategy, and the potential for targeted government and commercial relationships. The focus on these issues dovetails perfectly with the United States Space Command's defining approach to space operations. I've spoken and written extensively about that approach. It is framed through a joint, combined, and partnered lens, with each of these terms having distinct meaning. Joint, using all branches of our armed forces; combined, along with our key allies; partnered, in collaboration with partners from other agencies inside our government, with academia, and of course with industry. So my intent this morning is to focus on the latter two elements of this approach, our allies and our mission partners, and to emphasize the importance the United States Space Command places on the contributions of those allies and partners to our mission success. I'll approach that discussion in three parts this morning with you. First, the importance of space to our way of life and the challenges we face in ensuring seamless access to its benefits in a competitive, congested, and contested domain. A domain characterized by growing space and counter-space threats and the rapid expansion of allied and partner and commercial space activities. Second, ensuring that we are allied by design, and the role of our continued cooperation and collaboration in ensuring and maintaining the safety, security, stability, and sustainability of the domain through development and implementation of norms of responsible behavior in space. And finally, my vision for our future collaboration in space and the application of United States and United Kingdom's decades-long, quote-unquote, special relationship as a model for our partnership in space. So in preparing for my remarks this morning, I was struck by what stands out prominently in the UK's new defense space strategy and on the UK Space Command's website. Your motto: to make space safe, secure, and sustainable for all generations. It complements our own fundamental objective for the domain of deterring a conflict from beginning in or extending into space. And it aligns perfectly with our President's Space Priorities Framework, which pledges U.S. space power to enhance the security and reliance of space systems. And it aligns perfectly with his interim national security strategic guidance to ensure the safety, stability, and security of outer space activities. Most notably, it implicitly acknowledges that the new operating domain of space demands active and persistent engagement as well as awareness. It requires a concerted effort to overcome the challenges of what has become a competitive, congested, and contested environment due to the growing threats to U.S. and allied space operations, combined with the rapid expansion of commercial space activities. So for many decades, we considered the space domain a sanctuary. Space capabilities primarily focused on missile warning and traditional supporting functions like satellite communications, position, navigation, timing, and weather. We didn't have to worry about direct descent anti-satellite missiles, directed energy systems, cyber attacks, and the other modern threats to our high-value U.S. and allied space assets, let alone attacks on space capabilities like GPS that have become a part of our daily life for people in nations all around the world. Today, United States Space Command has a much broader mission, which includes the task to protect and defend U.S. and allied interests in the domain. These new functions and those of the UK Space Command are the result of a new reality. That is, we have recognized and acknowledged that the operating environment in space is no longer benign, and our space systems are potential targets at all levels of competition, crisis, and conflict, even as we rely more and more on the benefits derived from space capabilities. But it is exceedingly important also to understand this. While the domain is no longer benign, it need not be hostile. That, in fact, is why we reestablished United States Space Command, and that's why you created the UK Space Command, to make space safe, secure, and sustainable. So the People's Republic of China and Russia present the most immediate and serious threats to U.S. and allied space operations due to their active development, testing, and deployment of counter-space capabilities and associated military doctrine for use. Some examples of their growing capacity to threaten our interests in or from space include hypersonic vehicle missile tests to include a fractional orbit, operational tests of dual-use satellites that can grapple other satellites, destructive direct ascent anti-satellite missile tests that create hazardous debris and undermine every space operator's interest in space sustainability. The PRC and Russia seem determined to develop and deploy a broad range of counter-space capabilities designed to contest or deny U.S. or allied access to and operations in the domain, thereby turning a challenging operating environment into an increasingly hostile one. U.S. Space Command is here to ensure that doesn't happen. We are here to deter a conflict from beginning in or extending into the domain, but we are also ready to protect and defend our interests in that very domain if necessary. And because we are here, we can reduce the benefit that a potential adversary might seek to obtain through hostile activity in space, which can, in turn, contribute to integrated deterrence of aggression across all domains. So our ability to accomplish all this is largely a function of being allied by design and achieving success in mission collaboration. Our collective ability to deter a conflict from beginning or extending into space relies on our cooperation with allies and partners to develop best practices, standards, and norms of responsible behavior in space. As part of our collective alliance built on trust, common values, and shared interests, we must continue to establish, demonstrate, and uphold internationally accepted norms of behavior in space. The United States applauds the United Kingdom's leadership in the effort to adopt a United Nations resolution calling for the creation of international norms, rules, and principles for responsible behavior in space. We fully recognize the value of the United Nations open-ended working group to reach consensus on voluntary measures addressing threats in space and reducing the potential for misunderstanding, misperception, and miscalculation in space. The objectives outlined for the proposed United Nations efforts get after our shared goals for sustainability and responsible behavior in space. They are: 1, to review the existing international legal and normative frameworks concerning threats; 2, to consider current and future threats by states to space systems; and 3, to make recommendations on possible norms, rules, and principles of responsible behaviors relating to threats. All this is precisely what Vice President Harris was focused on in her recent remarks at Vandenberg Space Force Base, where she announced the United States' commitment to not conduct destructive direct ascent anti-satellite missile testing, and asked other nations to make similar commitments. Vice President Harris emphasized our determination to identify a baseline of shared principles beneficial to all spacefaring nations. She stressed the need for a common understanding of what is right, wrong, and acceptable with respect to actions and intent in the space domain. And she reflected on the realization that such rules and norms would contribute to space's sustainability and provide all space users a sense of order and stability. The very stability reflected in the stated objectives of the open-ended working group, which was co-sponsored by both the United Kingdom and the United States. So in line with Vice President the Vice President's announcement of our commitment was Secretary of Defense Austin's earlier memorandum on tenets of responsible behavior in space. In July 2021, Secretary Austin issued 5 tenets to clarify long-standing U.S. Department of Defense space operational practices. The Secretary intends for the Department to lead in demonstrating responsible behavior in space and stipulated that unless otherwise directed, DoD components would conduct space operations consistent with the following tenets. Number 1, operate in, from, to, and through space with due regard to others in a professional manner. Number 2, limit the generation of long-lived debris. Number 3, avoid the creation of harmful interference. 4, maintain safe separation and safe trajectory. And number 5, communicate and make notifications to enhance the safety and stability of the domain. The Vice President's announcement of our new commitment and the Secretary's memorandum on tenets of responsible behavior in space are primarily about safety, sustainability, and stability. But by creating expectations for what is considered to be responsible behavior, both also help identify and isolate instances of irresponsible behavior. That can increase costs and thereby also support the nation's deterrence objectives, including deterrence of conflict that begins or extends into space. A credible deterrence strategy harnesses all the tools of national power, including economic and diplomatic, making clear to competitors that attacks in space or other domains against U.S. interests of those our allies and partners will not successfully advance their objectives. Deterring aggression and attacks in space requires a whole-of-government approach in cooperation with our trusted allies and partners to strengthen our diplomatic, information, military, and economic strategies that discourage hostile actions in space and to use resilience and other space mission areas assurances features to deny the benefits of such attacks. So with the implementation of an integrated deterrence approach to national security, and with space capabilities being such a dominant enabling feature of virtually every lever of national power, the imperative to deter aggression and protect and defend our assets in space is all the more clear. Failure to deter attacks against our reconnaissance, communications, navigation, and early warning satellites creates deterrence challenges across all domains. So we have a big task. U.S. Space Command cannot do it alone. That's why we speak so frequently of and work so hard to implement our joint, combined, and partnered approach to our mission operations in space. That is why we must be allied by design. That is also why I knew it was so important to be with you here this morning at the United Kingdom Space Defense Conference. A few of our mutual allies understand its significance too. Several of them have also established their own space operations organizations. Each will contribute to the safe and responsible conduct of space operations. Prominent among them are France's new Space Command, Germany's new Space Command. Additionally, I recently joined Australia and Japan in celebrating the establishment of their own key space organizations, Japan's Space Operations Group and Australia's Defense Space Command. And during a recent visit through the Indo-PACOM region, I visited Korea's Space Operations Center, impressive in its own right. And these developments reflect the U.S. and allied collective acknowledgement of increasing counter-space threats posed by our adversaries, and that space is vital to our global way of life and an integral component of our respective national security strategies and policies. Space is tied to the prosperity of all nations and their citizens. There are countless other examples among our allies and partners, and I'll name just a few. NATO recently released its space policy on 17 January 2022, which captures NATO's overall approach to space. The ongoing development of the NATO Space Center at Ramstein and the NATO Space Center of Excellence in Toulouse demonstrate NATO's emphasis on developing space-related expertise across NATO forces. The release of our own defense space strategy in February and Australia's defense space strategy in March outlines our country's respective visions for defense as global actors in the space domain. France just concluded a successful Asterix 22 exercise, which will become a foundational space training exercise for Europe. And Global Sentinel, U.S. Space Command's premier multinational security cooperation effort, now boasts participation with up to 23 partner nations. And a few weeks ago, I sent Brigadier General Devin Pepper, my my J5. He represented the command in Santiago, Chile at the FADAI 22 Space Summit to strengthen commercial, military, and governmental partnerships with this key regional partner. And back home, U.S. Space Command continues to integrate allies onto our staff, as well as providing members to integrate in other nations' key space organizations. For example, we have Brigadier Paul Tedman from right here in UK working in my J5, as well as Colonel Regal from France, both doing great things for our command. And so I offer you these examples as a means of demonstrating that despite the challenges we face in the space domain today, the future in space for the United Kingdom and the United States and all responsible spacefaring nations is in fact bright. It is a future that promises more and more opportunities to advance our way of life, global security, and economic prosperity. In particular, I am pleased with the progress the US and the UK have made in space domain cooperation and collaboration. You may recall just last July, Air Vice Marshal Godfrey and I published an op-ed in the Daily Telegraph entitled, "A Special Relationship for the Unique Challenges of Space." In it, we wrote of the value of applying that 3/4 of a century-long special relationship to our collective efforts in space. With reference to the words of both Prime Minister Churchill and President Eisenhower, we wrote of the need to focus collectively on ensuring that the worst day in space never translates into a bad day on Earth. We wrote of Prime Minister Churchill understanding that, quote, "Together our great nations hold the power to save the future." And we wrote of President Eisenhower suggesting that, quote, "We are going to have peace even if we have to fight for it." Both men had a keen understanding of what it took to reacquire and maintain the safety and security of the United States and the United Kingdom. And both provided the inspiration we use to this day for ensuring our collective ability to maintain the security, safety, and stability of the space domain. We will need that inspiration. Our space-related alliances provide a very durable strategic advantage over our competitors and contribute to our collective ability to deter aggression and attacks in space, as well as in all other domains. So the future, as I said, is bright. The partnership is sound. The tasks are challenging, but the special relationship will endure and expand to meet those very challenges. So I'm honored to be part of it. I'm encouraged that the United Kingdom Space Command and the United States Space Command are working collectively and are seeking to deter conflict in space and protect and defend U.S. allies in that very domain. Together we can increase the world's collective security on orbit and on Earth. So again, thank you for the opportunity this morning to speak with you, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
General, thank you very much indeed. We do have some questions for you. The first one is, unsurprisingly, I suppose, around Ukraine. Does the war in Ukraine challenge the current space strategies?
Well, let's see. I would tell you, first of all, it feels good to kind of move around a little bit. Yeah, I will tell you from that perspective, I think our strategic approach remains the same. Really, because our strategic approach kind of boils down to three things. One is, countering competitor influence, strengthening our relationships and partnerships, and really building and maintaining a competitive advantage. So with what's happening in Ukraine, that really hasn't changed my strategic approach to it. If anything, it's reinforced it. We have had, in terms of tactical and operational, we've had a lot of observations, if you will. One, in fact, was my relationship with Todd Walters, commander of US EUCOM. We've always talked, and I've talked quite a bit about supporting and supported relationships, and so which is different for United States Space Command from the original one, the first one that stood up 1985 to 2002. That was, quite frankly, at that time, just concerned with supporting regional combatant commanders. So in other words, providing the missile warning, satellite communications, GPS type of capabilities in a supporting role to that combatant command. And we have certainly done that with Todd Walters and US EUCOM. So how did we, quite frankly, tailor the missile warning system for what we've seen go on in Ukraine? I think we can all admit, we know that there's been significant missile activity in that area of the world. And so how did we get ready for that? So we took a lot of time to make sure that we were supporting Todd with missile warning. Same with satellite communications. You've seen the expansion, if you will, of allied forces in Europe. And so with that comes an increasing demand for satellite communications. So we've had to really look at our satellite communications enterprise and see how we optimize that for operations in Europe. Same with global positioning systems. How do we look at that as we bring on an improved capability into our GPS satellite constellation? So really has been very good work. Missile warning, we've been throughout Europe in each one of Todd Walter's command centers and looked and trained and made sure everything was up to date and accurate in terms of capabilities. And so our supporting role to that has been very, very important. So we kind of look through that. So from a tactical operational level, we continue to learn with every event, but we're getting better each day. And but from the strategic position, it's really just reinforced what we've already been doing.
Thank you, General. The next one is, I guess, around dual use space in the commercial sector. Should we embrace technology-led modernization, in particular, the opportunities that commercial space providers offer?
Yeah, I tell you, I think the opportunities the commercial market industry provide to us is not a very sophisticated answer, but remarkable, interesting. We must take advantage of it. I think I heard Harv when he was up here answering some question, talking about Maxar, and what we've seen with commercial satellite imagery in terms of the news and how we're actually able to articulate without even having the military part of what's happening in Ukraine right now. That's one. The second one I would just tell you is just the explosion with SpaceX's Starlink. Up over 2,300 satellites on orbit right now, providing worldwide internet capabilities, and in particular how that has influenced what's going on in Ukraine in terms of operations and the ability to communicate. So I think as we look at those, they represent some resiliency that I think is important. When you talk about a mega constellation like Starlink, for example, I mean, to me, that's very much a resilient type of capability that we can leverage now and into the future, not only from a commercial perspective, but potentially from a military perspective as well.
Thank you again. And I think we'll make this the last one, and this is really around improving collaboration. What are your objectives in space, and do they fit with key allies and partners? If not, is there a balance to find?
Well, I think I heard Harv also mentioned entanglement, integrated deterrence. Those are all very important concepts to what we do. I think the allied and partnered approach is absolutely where we need to go. We've done this, and I'll be honest with you, we've done this in other domains. You probably, my background before I became a space operator was air and missile defense, and we'd been doing those types of allied and partner engagements, integration for years. And I'm excited to see that, and it's not just starting in the space enterprise, but it continues to grow and mature, and I think that's the key element. I mean, we've certainly seen from Ukraine, the value of allies and partners, not just here in Europe, but around the world. And the fact that I think that's been a surprise to many of the folks, in particular, Russia, in terms of how we've been able to come together, or continue to come together. So I think that's very important. I think one of the challenges, though, that we're working each and every day with regards to allies and partners is how do we get to a more comprehensive sharing amongst allies and partners? How do we declassify, reclassify documents and materials so that we're able to share? And quite frankly, I just had my commanders conference. I do 2 commander conferences per year. I just had one last week. And this is the first one we've actually incorporated our allies and partners. And of course, UK participated in that last week. And Goddard's, thank you. I appreciate sending your folks to be part of the conference last week. But we had a lot of good, frank conversations that we need to have. And honestly, we had one of our allies and partners, not in that particular forum, but in previous forums, talk about how do we get to a yes foreign instead of a no foreign all the time. And so we're looking very closely at how we do that, particularly on the U.S. side. How do we get to a point where we're sharing more and going from more, and I think we have to do that in order to get to an integrated capability as opposed to maybe just a sharing or interoperable capability. But integration is really the key in my mind, and the only way we're going to get there is if we continue to work with each other to get to a better position where we can share more together.
Gerald, thank you very much. Thank you both for the keynote speech and for taking some questions. And the fact that you're here, I think, is a real testament to our collaboration. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it.